2017, and I would like to call the Budget Committee meeting to order. First item that we have done from time to time is have everybody introduce themselves for the record. So I will start. I'm Dennis Hitchmans, citizen member and current chair.
Gary Williams, East Lane County Commissioner.
Herb Lodman, citizen member.
Jay Bozovich, Board of Commissioners.
Larry Abel, citizen member.
Sid Lykin, Board of Commissioners.
Dale Stoneberg, citizen member.
Pat Farr, Board of Commissioners.
Not Phil Carrasco. Pete Sorensen, Lane County Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. Judy Williams would like to go over a couple of compliance items first.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Compliance items. Just very quickly, Judy Williams in the budget office. I wanted to quickly introduce a couple other of our budget team in the back. So we have Sue Herron and John Mosby in the back table. And feel free, we're here for you. So before, during, after these meetings, let us know if you have any questions at any time so that we can help you in your process. Handouts, I just wanted to touch base. A lot of you have handouts in front of you. We typically give you the agendas, any handouts, presentations, answers to questions, put those in front of you. For those of you who have opted to do the electronic only version, you have that in your Dropbox and those files are out there for you. So just a quick example, today is May 9th. Everything for this day is 03A, 03B, your minutes, your handouts, and etc. So let us know if you have any issues accessing these. Very briefly on the minutes, you will be approving later today the minutes from last year, the last meeting. We did very brief minutes, as you remember, last year, and we've heard from several of you that you'd like to have a little bit more description in them. So we've worked with a temp agency for these 5 meetings that we have this year to really put a little bit more detail in those. So you'll be seeing a little more detail for the rest of the meetings. And then finally, questions. You will have time to ask questions throughout these presentations if time allows, and if time doesn't allow, or if staff aren't here and you want to ask a little bit more in-depth questions, do feel free to use note cards. You have a pile of note cards in front of you at the table. So just write down your questions and feel free to leave them there, and we'll pick them up after each meeting and coordinate the responses to those questions. So that's all I had, and I will turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you. Those of you that have not delved into Dropbox, I encourage you to do so. It will preclude a visit to the chiropractor after carrying those binders around. Okay, item 2, election of fiscal year 17-18 chair and vice chair. And I would just like to state that I would be honored and pleased to continue as chair. But if anybody has an opinion or thoughts on that matter, please feel free to say so.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Thank you very much for your vote of confidence. Now, Vice Chair.
Short straw.
I would like to nominate Herb Lodman to continue as Vice Chair.
Second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded to have Herb be the Vice Chair. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Thank you again.
I noticed the 2 short straws were down there, so you got them. Great.
Mr. Chair, are there any really crummy, hard jobs that we can nominate Phil Carrasco for?
No, we'll find something. We've got all night. Okay, the next item is approve the Lane County Budget Committee minutes for May 19th, 2016. Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve.
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of May 19th, 2016. Any further discussion?
Question. As I wasn't here for last year's budget committee. Should I abstain from approving those minutes?
Okay,
So that is my intention.
okay. Okay. Any other comments? All right, all those in favor of approving the minutes for May 19th, 2016, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? And one abstention. Okay. Item C, committee process. Anything?
No changes specifically. I think we covered questions for you, but you will have time for questions this evening. Those note cards mainly directed for the department presentations. Unless there's any questions from the committee members, we had our orientation, so we've met with all of you on those pieces.
Okay.
So nothing to add.
Okay. Would anybody like to make any opening comments? Particularly invite to the commissioners who have been dealing with budget issues since May 17th, 2016. Anything you'd like to start with? No? Okay. Looked like you were going to say something there.
Well, you know, I'm looking out at the folks in the audience, and I don't see a smile among them. So I was wondering if we could smile. My predecessor sometimes sang songs at the mic, but I'm not going to do that.
Okay. All right, budget message. Mr. Mokrahysky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. I wondered if the smiles had anything to do with the fact that it's 75 and sunny outside and we're sitting in a dark conference room. So we'll try to, hopefully we've got some good news for you tonight to share. And this has, I think, been a long time coming, and we're really pleased to be here with all of you. I want to say good evening to the members of the Budget Committee, to our elected and appointed officials and staff, to any members of the public that are here watching, and also to welcome our new committee members, Commissioner Gary Williams and Citizen Member Phil Carrasco. We know that Mr. Carrasco was not able, he notified us, wasn't able to be here this evening, but we look forward to working with him on this budget committee and through this process. Mr. Chair, we are pleased to present a responsibly balanced budget to the Budget Committee and to Lane County taxpayers. For the first time in 7 years, the General Fund and the Road Fund are structurally balanced with no use of reserves. The proposed county budget, again, for the second year in a row, includes no layoffs and no reductions in services to residents. Lane County has faced scarcity of resources for many years, including a 90% decline in federal timber funds over the past decade and a $6 million structural imbalance in both the General Fund and the Road Fund after the end of the Secure Rural Schools program in 2015. Since that time, we focused on two clear goals, and we've been consistent in pursuing these two goals over the past 3 years: creating long-term financial stability through a structurally balanced budget and repairing critical services to make our community safer, healthier, and more vibrant. Now, we may have a scarcity of resources, but we have an abundance of talent in Lane County. Our dedicated public servants are working diligently to implement practical solutions to curb growth of internal expenses, such as proactive and aggressive management of health insurance, workers' compensation, debt, vehicle and computer costs, and more. We have effectively reduced Lane County's budgeted health insurance costs by approximately $2 million annually. While employee health insurance rates in the market have increased approximately 10% on an annual basis, Lane County's health insurance rates have been flat for 3 years in a row. Our approach has been proactive and aggressive management of those costs, reducing the number of health plans over the last several years, shifting to a self-funded health plan, opening a clinic to manage employee health and wellness, and negotiating with our employee bargaining units in a collaborative manner for modest employee contributions to plans. We've used one-time resources, particularly from the final Secure Rural Schools payments to pay off and refinance debt, lowering interest costs to taxpayers by over $3 million. The proposed budget for next year also reflects positive growth in revenue and recommends 2 new policy changes. We'll talk more about this as we get into the committee process, and Christine Moody will delve into this a little bit in a minute. Those 2 recommended policy changes are to establish a more appropriate goal for general fund reserves, as well as to reduce budgeted expenses by approximately $1 million, thereby eliminating the lapse requirement in the general fund. Again, we'll talk more about that. After extensive analysis over the past year, we believe that both of those proposed policies are financially and operationally prudent. If objective third-party review of Lane County's budget and financial management is any indication of our progress in recent years, I believe that we're on the right path. In early 2017, we were really pleased that our stewardship of taxpayer resources was recognized when Moody's Investor Services upgraded Lane County's bond rating to AA2. That's the highest rating for that particular bond rating in Lane County's history. In 2016, as a precursor to that, the Oregon Secretary of State's office removed Lane County from its watch list of financially distressed counties. Many of the innovative solutions over many years that Lane County has implemented to responsibly balance the budget are now becoming leading practices in the state. We've also made gains through targeted and strategic investments in critical services. For the past 3 years, we've allocated additional resources to the district attorney's office. And the DA's office has made great use of those resources, as well as innovative and thoughtful approach to how they conduct business. The DA's office is prosecuting low-level felonies at a much higher rate than in previous years, reducing the number of no files from approximately 1,500 cases to 68 cases, a 96% decline in the number of no files, and in the process making our community safer. 3 new mental health specialists that began working in the jail this year that this budget committee and board approved last year during that process are providing critical behavioral health services to support the successful and accountable transition of local offenders back into the community and to reduce the cycle of crime. Remember last year we had that big circle graph of the public safety system, and we talked about, we spent a lot of time talking about the need for jail beds, and of course that has been a topic of conversation in the community recently. We also want to make sure that we're funding our DA's office and we're able to prosecute those low-level, intervene at early stages of crime to make sure that offenders are being diverted into supervision and access to services, to make sure that we have probation officers that can supervise offenders, to make sure that we have services, mental health, substance abuse, job training, housing services that are available. And so all of these things, now we're starting to see some of the fruits of the labor and the investments that have been made and the success there. Our community health centers served more than 5,000 new patients in 2016. We're also working with community partners to identify both temporary and permanent solutions to homelessness, including Operation 600 to create 600 new units of permanent supportive housing by 2021. Our proposed budget maintains stable funding for the Human Services Commission, a local collaboration between Lane County, Eugene, and Springfield. Despite Lane County's own revenue declines, we have actually increased, this budget committee and this board have increased our support for poverty and homeless services over the past several years. Even though we've seen our resources decline, the budget committee and the board have maintained your commitment to those critical services. At the same time that we've seen declines in funding from other entities, including from the city of Eugene, Lane County continues to contribute over 50% of the total local allocation between the 3 entities to the Human Services Commission, while 82% of those services are provided to residents within Eugene and Springfield. In addition to Human Service Commission support, Lane County spends approximately $12 million annually to support additional human services for the most at-risk and vulnerable residents in our communities. We have also added 2 positions. Last year, the Budget Committee and the Board approved additional resources for assessment and taxation. We had converted the work with assessment and taxation, converted those temporary positions and added some additional resources to assist with reappraisals. And we know that our assessment and taxation operation continues to struggle with a significant decline in state support through the CAFA grant. Despite the reduction in state support and the increased reliance on local county property taxpayers to provide assessment and taxation services, our A&T staff, Mike Coles and his team, have done a phenomenal job of being innovative, improving the space with which they work in, to be creative and innovative and respond to the needs of customers, to do the appraisals that they can. And we need to continue to work with our community partners to identify both state funding and the potential for local funding to support those critical services in our community. That's a service, again, that Lane County provides for all of the taxing districts throughout the community. And we'll talk in a minute about for every dollar of property taxes that a taxpayer in Lane County pays, about 11 cents of that goes to Lane County. Nearly 90% of tax dollars paid by property taxpayers in Lane County go to fund schools and municipalities and other local services, not Lane County. And yet Lane County assessment and taxation is responsible for all of the appraisal, tax collection services in our community that benefits all of those taxing entities. We are also, over the last several years, we are striving to be open, accessible, and inclusive in our workplaces and our communities. Over the past 2 years, in particular, we have reinvigorated our involvement in equity and human rights and engaged in new and thoughtful ways with underrepresented and culturally and ethnically diverse residents. We continue our support for our new Equity and Access Coordinator, our Equity and Access Advisory Board, Recruitment Coordinator and Human Resources that is doing proactive outreach in the hiring process, our new Diversity Internship Program that we're really excited about. We're providing funding for a new purchasing, in addition to the internship program, equity training requirements, and much more. And in our proposed budget, a new proposal, we have very few additional proposed positions and programs for next year. But one of the new proposals that we have is to provide funding for a new purchasing and procurement coordinator to improve outreach and access and standardize and streamline business engagement. It has been rather surprising to me that for an organization the size of Lane County and the an over $500 million annual budget, that we don't have a central procurement position. Departments are doing procurement. They have contract and procurement positions and are doing fantastic work on that, but we don't have someone who's centrally coordinating that, particularly for smaller departments, making sure that in all cases we have standardization, that we're getting the best deal possible, that we're outreaching, particularly with local businesses. All things being equal, where possible, we should be engaging with our local businesses and encouraging purchasing local here and supporting small businesses in our community. So that position will help, and I believe that in the end it will more than pay for itself through cost savings over time. We've added 3 positions in land management to improve rural code enforcement and long-range planning. One of the things that former Commissioner Stewart and current Commissioner Bozovich often talk about is the challenge in unincorporated areas in responding to residents for code enforcement challenges. We also know that throughout our organization, and in code enforcement in particular, we have outstanding staff, very limited, who are eligible for retirement. And so we need to be looking at workforce planning in the long term and making sure that we have staffing levels that are adequate to meet the needs not just today, but in the transition of our leadership moving forward. We've added, so in code enforcement and in long-range planning, we've added 2 positions in the road fund, restoring the Waymaster program in a new way, and enhancing engineering and bridge services. We also add a half a position in animal services to enhance our very limited services in that area. And we have some one-time funding that we're allocating towards a dog box that we'll talk a little bit more about. We're also investing in a high-performing workforce. This is a theme that we've had for several years. One of the things that I've shared with this committee and with many others, one of the reasons that I came to Lane County is despite the decline in resources and despite a number of challenges that the organization faced, it was very apparent to me early on that this is an organization that has great people. And so we have an obligation to make sure that we're investing in those great people and that we create a culture of leadership here that allows individuals who want to seize leadership opportunities to move into those. That's an organization that people who are outside of Lane County and are looking for new and exciting opportunities look at our organization as a destination, a place that they want to come. So we're investing in a high-performing workforce through long-range workforce planning and leadership development programs. We know that a significant number of our employees are eligible for retirement. Nearly 200 employees currently are eligible to retire, and we've seen, particularly in speculation of changes to PERS at the state, it's driven a number of our employees and public employees around the community and throughout the state to look at their retirement options. So we need to plan for that. And we continue to make investments to support the leaders of the future. All of these additions that we're proposing in the budget and the continued support for additions that have been added over the past few years are targeted investments that reflect the board's strategic priorities. So while we've achieved financial stability for the moment and we're making positive investments that improve health and safety, many of the most critical services that Lane County provides to residents remain underfunded, particularly in the areas of public safety and road and bridge maintenance. Our public safety services in rural communities are limited. Our road, bridge, and park infrastructure is aging and costly. The reality is, as I mentioned before, that nearly 90% of all property taxes paid, and here's the dollar graph that we put, every year we need to put together a new graph to sort of keep you interested in the challenges and the opportunities that we have ahead of us. Nearly 90% of all property taxes paid by Lane County residents and businesses go to fund services provided by schools, cities, and other municipalities. And that leaves Lane County government with one of the lowest property tax rates of any county in the state. Almost $1.28 is our permanent rate. It's the 7th lowest permanent property tax rate of any county in the state. And so, again, this graphic represents for every dollar that a property taxpayer in Lane County pays, 11 cents of that dollar goes to fund Lane County government services for our permanent property tax rate. 89 cents, 46 cents funds school districts, 32 cents funds cities, 7 cents funds library parks, and 4 cents funds fire districts. So this is a challenge that we can't change because there are property tax caps that went into effect in the mid-90s. And of course, we all know, we talk every year about the perfect storm, the declining federal resource, the 90% decline in federal timber funding and the end of the Secure Rural Schools program and the 7th lowest property tax rate that we're frozen with. Leaves us with financial constraints and very limited options from a resource standpoint. Significant challenges in addition to these, such as declining federal and state revenues, will also continue to place pressure on our progress. Maintaining a responsible, structurally balanced budget without further erosion to critical services will require continued focus, innovation, and support from our partners. And given our track record of responsibly managing limited resources, I am confident that we are up to the challenge. Mr. Chair and members, I want to close by recognizing our outstanding team of leaders in Lane County. In particular, I don't recognize enough Christine Moody and her budget team, Judy Williams, John Mosby, and Sue Herron, for their great work, and for all the budget and finance staff throughout our departments in Lane County. We really have an incredible team. I also want to thank our elected and appointed department heads and their outstanding staff we always talk about team and, everyone, it really is true. And I have seen this. This is now my third proposed budget, and I've seen it every single year. And I will tell you, every year it seems to get better. The extent to which people come together, rally around our common purpose and vision, and commit to solving challenges with less regard for what is in the particular parochial interest of their area. Everyone advocates for their area, and they want the most resources and the best services and the best people for their area, but they also recognize that we're part of a common purpose, a common organization, a common good, and we sink or swim together. Many of our leaders are in this room, many are not, and last December, we had our first annual leadership summit. We're going to do this every year. We have a leadership summit for around 200 of our employees throughout the organization. And what I shared with that group at that summit is that my view is that leadership is not defined by the number of people an individual supervises or the size of the budget that they manage, but rather leadership is a person's ability to influence others towards the achievement of a goal. So we need to think about leadership in that way, not about where someone is on the organizational chart, not about how many FTE they have in their department, not about the complexity and challenges of all the issues in their area, but really a leader is anybody who can compel others towards a common purpose, a common goal, a common good. And we have leaders throughout our organization that are doing that. The progress that Lane County continues to make is a reflection of the quality of people we have in this organization and community aligned towards a common purpose and a common vision established by the Board of Commissioners. And finally, Mr. Chair, I think it's important that we acknowledge the number of public sector entities in our local communities, in our state, and around the country that are struggling with financial constraints, all forced to balance the needs of those we serve with the limitations on generating resources to pay for those services. Our challenges might be extreme compared to others, but they're not unique. We've seen proposals that eliminate services and lay off employees, and this organization itself has been forced to do that in the past because of drastic declines in revenue in a short period of time. And sometimes public service organizations have no alternatives than to do that. But we do have an obligation to exhaust every alternative to reduce internal expenses before we pursue cuts to services to those who pay for those services. My hope is that Lane County serves as an example of how an organization can have millions of dollars wiped away from its budget, maintain a low property tax rate, have significant constraints on its resources, and still find a way to structurally balance the budget without layoffs, cuts in services, or use of reserves, and to make targeted investments that improve health, safety, and vibrancy in our community. And this is the Lane County way. And that's what makes all of us, I think, in this room, Lane County proud. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to make one quick comment while I've got the DA in the room to embarrass her. The investment we made in adding FTE in her office and the utilization she's made of it and charging these lower level crimes and dropping that, failure to charge by 96%. What people may not understand is a lot of our funding from the state comes as a percentage of people we have under supervision in this county. And because of those efforts of the DA, we have increased our percentage of the state population from about 8% to 9% in this upcoming budget year. What that means is the community corrections funding, the justice reinvestment grant funding, all increases by about 12.5% because our share of the pot has grown. That means we're getting about $2 to $3 million more in this budget cycle because of that investment in a couple FTE in the DA's office and the work the DA has done to reprioritize how they do work in her office. So, I think we may have invested about $200,000 last budget cycle, and we're getting about a $2.5 million payoff for that. I think it's a pretty good return on investment, and I think the DA needs to be congratulated for the work she's done to get that investment to fruition for us. So thank you very much, Patty.
Okay, any other comments? Okay. Mr. Mokrahysky, I'm always impressed with the process that county administration goes through from April or was it May 18th or 20th, the day after we passed the last budget. Could you describe briefly all of the steps that you went through to come up with the major steps to come up with the budget? Because I want to give credibility to that process and have people understand that it was a significant process, and line item criticism is probably not worth the time. So would you like to do that?
Sure. In a nutshell, I'll share with you. I don't want to give an exhaustive list, but what I'd say is that the budget process is a never-ending process. It's really, we need to not think we come together for 2.5 or 3 weeks of the year in this sort of formally defined process under state law, and we think that this is sort of, and this is a critical piece, probably the most critical piece of the budget process, but our budget and financial management is a never ending. We do it every single day. So, we've tried to integrate our budget and financial management process into everything we do. We do quarterly financial reports to the Board of Commissioners, along with strategic planning updates. We really integrated both of those process, strategic planning and financial and budget management. Obviously, we do 5-year forecasting. And so it really starts in terms of the steps that we go through. We update our 5-year forecast, and we try to get a good handle on what we're looking at for the next year. That requires us to really understand how revenues are going to be coming in, which requires departments to enter all of their revenues and their expenses, so we have a better handle on those details. We pull our leadership team together at the beginning of each year. That's typically in January, and that includes the Board of Commissioners, as well as our elected and appointed department heads and finance staff and others throughout the organization, and that's of course open to the public. And at that point, during the leadership meeting, we're starting to lay out the particular challenges that we have and that we're looking at for the following year. And then we go into departments entering their budgets. Once departments submit their revenue and expenses, then we have a better handle on specifically what the shortfall or issues are going to be. We start meeting as a budget and county administration team and looking at identifying particular areas that we want to focus on. I will say that what we really have tried to do and what we've done differently this year that I didn't mention earlier is, we did not ask departments for cuts this year. We just said we've had so many years of reductions. We've gone through this exercise of asking for people to give up 5 or 10% of their budget, and we really have tried to focus on, let's look at our internal expenses. Let's hone that. Let's shrink that as much as possible. So that was a new step that I think alleviated hopefully a little bit of workload for departments and a little bit of stress for staff. Frankly, every time an employee in a position ends up on a cut list, it has an impact because it's attached to a name. And so somebody goes, gosh, I'm on that list. What does that mean to me? Where am I valued in the organization? So some of this with our approach has been to say, it's not just about a bunch of numbers. It's numbers that align to people. We're a service organization, right? The vast majority of the money that we spend is on people because we don't manufacture goods. We provide services. We employ people to provide those services. So then we go into meetings with departments, and and in this process, we've not finalized my proposed budget, but we are looking at what we can do internally, and then we're talking with departments to understand revenue and challenges. We're also, this year, we asked if you could add a resource, where would it go? What would you do? And we tried to listen to what commissioners have said to us throughout the year and what they're hearing from their constituents and incorporate those thoughts into the budget. And then we refine it. We sort of find out where are we on the list in terms of structurally balancing, what types of cuts or reductions do we need to make, what are our strategies to get to zero, and then how do we try to move the needle on some of these targeted strategic investments that are aligned there, and then we present it to all of you. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you, because I know it's a substantial process, and I wanted that to see the light of day tonight. So thank you. Okay. Any other comments or questions?
I think you just said the music goes round and around. Whoa,
Yes.
whoa, and it
Yes.
comes out here.
Yeah. But it's not so much country western, woe is me, I've lost my pickup, my dog. This is, I think we're singing a little happier tune this year, which is, after this is 13 years, 12 years, it's really gratifying to see. And I think a lot of what we're going to see and the stability in the organization is your leadership. So thank you. Budget overview.
Good evening, Budget Committee members. So I will give you an overview and a little more detail in some areas than the County Administrator went over, but we will, of course, receive presentations from departments, so you'll be getting a lot more detail at those meetings over the next few weeks here. So to start, we'll talk about the size of the entire budget, covering all of our funds. For 17-18, the proposed budget is just under $600 million. That is a decrease of about $19.5 million from the current year, 3%. And then I've broken it down by fund type here for you to see the differences. Percentage-wise, the biggest change is in the debt service funds. That is related to that one-time prepayment of debt that occurred in 16-17. So it's not anything negative happening in that way. It's just that fund decreasing in size as that money goes out of it. And then we have variations happening in our special revenue fund, capital fund. Internal service funds are the funds moving back and forth between the departments paying for internal services. That decrease is actually going to be indicating the decrease in internal costs that you're hearing about. So that number going down is also not a bad thing. General fund going up a small amount, about 1%, $1.3 million. So a little more detail on the total FTE that the county as a whole will have, just over 1,500 FTE. This includes all of our regular full-time employees and our temp employees. It does not include the extra help that work at elections, the fairgrounds, other places. They don't actually carry FTE as part of their position. So just to give you an idea, we do have more employees than we have FTE. The first chart up there, a little difficult to see, is the county FTE and comparing it to the 1,000 population in Lane County. The reason we show that is you can see the FTE has stayed fairly flat over the last 10 years, varying just a little bit. But the population, that blue section, has been growing. So we've now crossed over. And what this means is that you have less FTE per 1,000 residents. So we compare that to other jurisdictions on how many employees we actually have providing the service to the residents. Down below, I've broken down the FTE by service category for you. So the one on the left there, our public health areas actually have the most FTE at just over 500, followed pretty closely by public safety, which is about 480. The next two there, if you can read them, are general government and roads and infrastructure. Both of those have just over 200 FTE each. And then community development and culture and recreation, which is going to be parks. Those are bringing in about 60 FTE together in those two different areas. So I do have a few highlighted economic indicators. These are some of the pieces that the Board of Commissioners hears from the Budget Office when we give our quarterly reports to them. Especially we focus on things that may have an impact on our budget in some way, or that give us some kind of leading indicator about what the economy is going to be doing. So unemployment, as everyone has probably heard, is very low, 4% as of March 2017. And we've also had a 12-month employment growth of 1.7% in Lane County. This is specific to Lane County. Lane County has also seen a population growth of about 4% since 2010. And in-migration makes up 91% of that total. And why I pointed that out is the state as a whole, in-migration is about 70%. So what that means is more people moving into the area. It's not just related to our birth-death ratio occurring in the county. So we do have more people as a percentage moving into Lane County. A housing market update as of March of 2017. As everyone's probably aware, the housing market is very strong. Sale prices are going up, so about 9.5% over the last year. This is year over year. As far as an average sale price, median sale price going up almost 8% in the last year. This is about job openings projected between 2014 and 2024. So looking out 10 years, what I found very interesting about this chart, though, is the difference there. I've circled government for you. And the big difference that you see in the growth openings, which are the green, which is hard to see on the government chart there, compared to the replacement openings. This feeds into exactly what you just heard from the county administrator about retirements expected in this area. So as we know our numbers, we're hearing that from other local governments, there is larger retirements expected over the next 10 years, which will have its challenges and opportunities that we'll touch on. So some financial condition highlights that have occurred since you last heard from us. Some of these were mentioned in the budget message. In June of 2016, we heard about the removal of Lane County from the Secretary of State's watch list. They do a financial condition of Oregon counties, and if there are certain indicators that are indicating some financial distress, they put those counties on a watch list. Lane County was removed from that list. We had been on it since they had started that report in 2012. In February is when we received notice of the Lane County's bond rating being increased, as County Administrator mentioned, to our highest rate in Lane County's history. And then also in February 2017, the third successful audit on the public safety levy was released. In April is when we recommended that we change the general fund reserve level. I'll touch a little more on that coming up, but we will be changing to a minimum of 20% of operating revenues. The current policy is 10% of operating revenues. I'll explain some more about why we're doing that. So just to touch on some budget basics, I think everyone on the committee knows you've been doing this long enough, but a little bit about Oregon budget law that dictates how we prepare the budget. It is prepared at the fund level, is the top level. So that's why you hear us talk a lot about funds and fund types. Our fund types are listed there. Then it goes down to the organizational unit. So especially in the general fund, we have almost every department receiving general fund. So you'll have fund level and then you'll have departments below the fund. We also focus a lot on revenue versus resources and requirements versus expenditures. And this is where we get into talking about structurally balancing the budget, which is different than just balancing the budget, which I'll touch on that in a minute. But just to kind of clarify what the difference is between the two, revenue is going to be the new money coming into the county is every year is the easiest way to say that. But it's property taxes versus non-property tax revenue. It's money received from other funding sources like the federal government, the state government, as well as money that we receive each year for services we provide, fees, licenses, fines that are charged. Then we also have money that is included in the resources total. So the resources includes all that revenue I just mentioned, plus any money that we've carried forward from the prior year. So any reserve money, beginning fund balance. And then any transfers that might be coming in, especially one-time transfers. That occurs across the funds as we're paying for different things. On the expenditure side, requirements side, expenses are ongoing costs related to mainly operations, including personnel, material and services, capital expenses, and debt service payments. But then on the requirements, which includes all of those expenditures, you also add in any contingency and reserves that you have. So the structurally balancing of a budget occurs when your ongoing revenues meet your ongoing expenses, not just your total resources equaling your total requirements. So here says a little better, the balanced budget is required by budget law. We always, as a local government, have to balance our budget. We can't run a deficit as the federal government does. We have to have our resources equaling our requirements. But structurally balancing the budget is, again, when you look at those ongoing revenue versus ongoing expenses. So over the past several years, we've focused on the structurally balancing of the budget. Once we had eliminated the deficit as a whole, we wanted to make sure that we were structurally balanced to eliminate that constant reduction that you were hearing from us every year. At the leadership team that the county administrator mentioned in January, we did have an initial forecasted structural deficit still in both the road fund and the general fund. They were both right about 2 million, the general fund being just a little higher at 2.4. That was before we started budget prep. So to get a little more detail on the total resources of the entire county budget, all funds combined, this is what makes up those total resources. Resource carry forward being the biggest piece there at 35%. Not all of that turns into reserves. There's many times where a department may have received a grant that extends for more than 1 year. So they will be carrying the funds forward over a few years to spend it down. Taxes and assessments countywide are just about 10%. And then you can see all the other details there. Fees and charges being the next largest, 21%. On the requirement side, personnel services are about 28%, material and services 32%, debt services just under 2%, and our reserves being about 30%. So as you notice that fund balance carryover, resource carryover was 35, but reserves turned into 30. As I mentioned, that's the difference in the funding that's being spent in a year as they carry it forward. So budget by fund type, going back to those fund types. This graph is meant to display the amount of money that is special revenue in particular, meaning that the county does not have a lot of control over how they spend that. Example is gas tax must be spent on roads. We have a lot of grant revenue in our budget, so that goes into a special revenue fund, video lottery. And then we have internal service funds. As I mentioned, that's the money moving between the funds within the county for us to pay for internal services. So our next largest is the general fund, which is the one that the budget committee and the board has the most control over on how we spend those funds. Now I'll focus a little bit on the general fund. And for the reason that this is the one that I mentioned has the most control for the board and the budget committee. So the services provided out of the general fund include public safety, which covers the covers the sheriff, the district attorney, youth services, and justice courts. Assessment and taxation, elections, public health, animal services, property management, finance, facilities, county administration, and county council. As a whole, the general fund pays for about 30 to 35% of the FTE, some of that with transfers out of the fund over into special revenue funds. The proposed budget for the general fund next year will be just about $93.8 million. As I mentioned, that is an increase of about $1.3 million, almost 1.5% from current year. And our ongoing revenue and expenditures, that number that we're really focused on in the structural balance, is about $79 million. So the remaining between the 93 million and the 79 is going to be our transfers, one-time transfers, and the contingencies and reserves. The FTE in the general fund will be about 413, which is an increase of 1 right here. For the general fund specifically, the breakdown of the total resources, as you can see, taxes and assessments makes up the biggest piece at about 45%, most of that being property taxes, although we do have car rental tax and some payments in lieu of taxes in that number also. And then our beginning fund balance, about 15% of the entire fund size. So revenue source comparisons, this is one that we've looked at several times. I'm showing it to you in a little different way this year. This is showing property taxes and federal revenue over the last 10 years. So if we went back further, federal revenue would likely even be higher than property tax revenue. But what I'm trying to show here is that the federal revenue is the red line, the property tax is the blue line. So you can see how they have grown apart, with federal revenue going down at a fairly fast rate. Our property tax is growing at the steady about 3% a year that's allowed statutorily. This has really made the fund very dependent on our property tax revenue, whereas before it had a little more variety in resource type, but we are very more dependent on the property taxes. So a little more on the source of timber funds. The federal revenue that I just described on that graph, the piece that's in the general fund is described at the bottom of this chart, which is the O&C lands, Bureau of Land Management. That act started in 1926. So now that the Secure Rural Schools payments have ended, we have returned to receiving a share of the timber revenue. And that's what's been received in the current year, and that is what's budgeted in the 17-18 proposed budget. The National Forest System that's mentioned at the top is funds that go into the road fund and the school fund. So on the expense side within the general fund, wages and benefits make up about 53% of the fund, material and services at just under 20%, reserves and contingency as the whole fund size is about 15.5%. And we do transfer out about $11 million out of the fund over to special revenue funds in order to provide services there, especially health and human services, a little bit in the sheriff's office, and to public works. So a little bit of focus on the discretionary general fund. This is different than the entire general fund size. We focus on the funds that are received into what we refer to as general expense. It's not into one department. Those funds consist of property tax revenue, the timber revenue that I just mentioned, car rental tax, most of those being not generated by a department and a service that they provide. So when we focus on that number, it's about 63 million of that entire 93 million. And where those funds are spent, about 61%, this is for the 17-18 budget, will be for public safety, public health just under 7%, general government, which includes assessment and taxation and elections and some of those internal services, is about 8%, non-departmental being the things that happen in general expense. We pay some county dues. You receive a sheet that covers those. We'll hand those out when you hear from general expense. And then the reserve, about 22% of the discretionary general fund makes up that reserve. So going back to our initial projected structural deficit and how we eliminated that deficit as we were going through our budget preparations. So first and foremost, it was the continued focus on internal cost decreases. Health insurance rates stayed flat for the third year in a row. That was due to our going self-funded and the employee clinic and maintaining or doing some wellness programs for employees in order to decrease those claim costs. Fleet expense for the general fund decreased about 8.5% from current year. That's largely in part to things that started a couple years ago when we looked at vehicle life, size of fleet. It's been a few different focus points there in fleet. And then general liability and workers' comp charges have decreased in the general fund about 7.5% from current year. The change in personnel budgeting. The county administrator mentioned this just briefly. This is the change to how we're budgeting our vacant positions. Internally, we had what we referred to as a lapse policy in the general fund. I mentioned we give discretionary general fund to departments. Yeah, I see frowns. It's confusing. We would say, here's the discretionary general fund for that service, but we need you to give us back 2% of it at the end of the year. That was the lapse that was required at the end of the year. And most of that was generated by departments having vacancies. You're never going to have 100% employment of every position on every day of the year. You're going to have vacancies occurring. So what happens, though, was the budget was higher in the beginning of the year, and then we would carry forward extra cash at the end of the year. That made up our fund balance and our reserve. But our Government Financial Officers Association, which gives the best practices on how to budget, really recommends that you look first at your vacancies and build it in at the beginning of the process whenever possible. And what that does is it decreases your budgeted expense in personnel. Now, it is an estimate. We had to look back at some history. We actually looked only at the 2% lapse number. So even though we had departments that have been lapsing much more than that on personnel, just because of conditions at that moment in time, not something that we can predict in the future, we stayed just with the 2%. So that was just about $1 million that was decreased out of the general fund. We do have a contingency just so that we make sure that we don't hold up any kind of providing of services, so there won't be any direction that a position couldn't be filled. If it can be filled, we will find out how to fill it. So we also had revenue changes due to the strong economy. We had stronger than expected revenue growth, especially out in department activities. We also received additional information on the timber revenue that I mentioned, the O&C timberlands. We receive those reports as they're doing the logging every month, and that has been, timber prices have been fairly high, so we increased the projected revenue in that area. Car rental tax has also been growing very fast, probably due to tourism and the strong economy there. So some of those increased in the general fund. Yes.
No, this is important. So do you have the numbers of the ONC and the U.S. Forest Service, the actual dollar amount so far through, do you have those with you?
Not with me. Well, do you just want to know like how much we'll receive, or
Yes.
how much they're logging?
No, how much we are going to receive?
So for, let's see if I can remember off the top of my head. I know general fund, we're budgeting about $2.5 million.
Okay.
And for comparison's sake, our last Secure Rural Schools payment into the general fund was about $4.4 million. Mm-hmm. But the road fund and the school fund share about $1.3 million. So that means about $900,000 into the road fund.
Okay.
It was a little higher. The road fund, the National Forest, is a very different formula. They don't just pay on the last year, which is what ONC does. They pay on a 7-year rolling average. So you can have some years in there that really mess with the average.
All right, that's what I needed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So the policy and practice changes, we went over the vacant position budgeting, so we removed the requirement for that 2% lapse and replaced it with an increased focus on anticipated vacancies. That thereby decreased the structural deficit. The reserve policy, again, we look to the Government Financial Officers Association. They recommend that governments have no less than 16.66%, to be exact, 2 months of operating funds for a reserve. So the 10% for Lane County was definitely low. And when we look back historically, we actually have been carrying forward more than 10%. Much of that on purpose, as the board reserved in order to keep services stable. Sometimes we were carrying forward extra lapse, got those Secure Rural Schools payments late in the year, so we would have more. So, and the reliance on the property tax revenue that I mentioned earlier, which we do not receive until November, December, makes it even more important that we have a reserve to pay for services until we start receiving property tax revenue. So we have changed it to a goal of 20%. In the 17-18 proposed budget, we're at about 17.2%. So we're not there yet. It might take a few years to get there, but that is the goal going forward. It will also help us maintain our bond rating, which, as you heard, was upgraded and potentially could be upgraded even more in the future. They really focus on reserves of a local government. So some highlights of the budget changes in the general fund specifically for 17-18. Ongoing expenditures, about $189,000 was added to the proposed budget. That's for a purchasing supervisor position, as well as some enhanced training due to changes in technology in some areas, extra help for the performance auditor, the internal government relations manager, who's up with the legislature, needs some extra help to help him track all those bills. Reclassification of some positions in elections due to also changes in the technical requirements of those positions, especially with things going so, with the voting machines becoming so much more technical they need a different level of position. Then some one-time expenses. So we have broken these out for you this year. This is how we track our structural balance. About $336,000. A dog box for animal services truck as a one-time expense, about $50,000. There will be a facilities assessment next year in the same way that we have looked at fleet and computers. We're going to focus on our internal facilities. Phoenix program movement to youth services required a one-time payment. And then we have a telephone system upgrade for our general fund lines. That's a one-time capital investment. So looking forward, our five-year financial forecast, continued structural balance will require diligence, as the county administrator mentioned. We do still have revenues not growing as fast as our expenditures. So when we look out 5 years, we don't stay balanced structurally. We will have to continue to look for creative solutions, focus on our internal costs. Some opportunities that we have in those areas, the ONC forest management. If they change the amount that they're logging or timber revenues stays strong, timber prices stay strong, that could potentially impact the general fund positively. On the challenges side, we have service levels that are not adequate in certain areas. So there is a pressure to add staff in order to provide more services. The state budget unknowns, the general fund does rely on probably about $7 or $8 million in state revenue directly into it. So that could put pressure on the fund. And then personnel expenses, including our PERS employer rates, which are projected to go up every year for the next few bienniums. And then on the anticipated increased retirements that were mentioned, that actually could be on both sides of the equation, opportunity and challenges. So as the staff goes out, we lose a lot of historical knowledge and talent, but many times then you can bring in different types of positions, relook at things. So planning for the future. As we've mentioned many times, we focus on our strategic plan. It's our guiding document when we're adding things to the budget. So we will focus on that for strategic and financial planning going forward. Using our limited resources on those strategic priorities, continued review of our financial policies to make sure we're doing best practices in those areas, and then looking to repair services that align with our strategic plan. And with that, I'm open for questions.
Okay, questions? Go ahead.
Christine, thank you. Great presentation. You did that without notes, it seemed. Wow.
Forgot to look at them.
You know, the only thing that I'm going to add is a bit of a caveat, and generally good news that we're receiving basically because of the structural imbalance and because of the strategic plan that we are adhering to throughout the county. And it really is bringing us in working in a more disciplined fashion from my perspective. But one thing I wanted to mention, you mentioned that you said that housing, the cost of housing is up almost 10%, the average median cost of housing. Wonderful. Except as our job growth increases and as unemployment declines, we have an issue with the actual wages that are being paid in our community. While jobs are increasing, wages aren't. And while housing has gone up 10%, the people paying rent on those houses' income has not gone up 10%. And that gap continues to broaden. And that is exacerbated, a word I used this morning, a little bit louder than I used it just now, that exacerbates the fact that we have people who are not able to maintain their housing, not able to get into their housing, and we have an issue with supply of housing in our community. And until we can address that, then no matter how great the numbers look, and no matter how much we cheer the fact that our real estate market is burgeoning at this point in time, we have people who are losing their homes right now. We have people who are paying 50, 60% of their income into housing, allowing them very other discretionary options in their life, including childcare, including transportation, including recreation, including nutrition. So we have to keep track of the fact that while we are doing a superb job as a county, from my estimation, based upon what I saw 5 years ago when I first started looking at the budget and looking at the history, this is a very pleasant evening as far as the numbers are concerned and as far as our performance is concerned. But it saddens me that so many people outside of these walls are actually losing their houses, are actually being pushed out of their homes or are actually paying a higher fee, or a far higher percentage of their income for their housing. And until we do something about that, until we as a community, we as a county, this is a city and the cities in the county do something about allowing more housing, about putting more entry-level housing and more mid-housing in our community, that's going to continue to be a problem. And no matter how well we do and with our structural imbalance, and no matter how much we cheer the apparently low unemployment numbers, that unemployment number doesn't tell the true picture of people living in poverty, people unable to feed their kids, unable to maintain adequate housing. We've got to keep our eye on that ball at all times.
Good point. Thank you. And there is a little bit of detail on that point in the overview of the budget document. I should have highlighted that tonight, but we do try and cover the percentage of poverty, the houses that don't have the heating and the running water and those pieces too.
And I would be remiss if I didn't state also that over the course of the last 3 years at least, our budget message has included poverty, has included our addressing poverty, human services, and the needs in the community at a rate that far exceeds our governmental partners. We are finding ways to innovatively address human services in ways that 2 years ago put 404 veterans into houses. We're doing things that have never been done before, but it doesn't diminish the fact that we have a lot of people in our community who simply cannot maintain or cannot find housing.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So 21.15% of our total resources is fees and charges, which is the second largest piece of our budget, second only to carryover amounts. Do the reimbursements for like clinical services in our federally qualified health clinics from the Affordable Care Act through our CCO, is that considered a fee or charge versus the piece of the pie that's only 7.6%, which is federal revenue?
I'm going to have to defer to H&HS to know, see if they know.
Yeah.
It's fees and charges, they're saying, yes.
Yeah. So, that I want to point that out because most people will look at that huge piece of pie and think, oh my gosh, they must be charging a lot for a building permit, or they must be charging a lot. That's really about being reimbursed for the medical services we're providing to folks that can't afford health care. And it's the reimbursement we're getting through the state government, from the federal government, and where we're looking at the largest driver of the state's $1.6 billion budget hole. So as we look at this budget, we talk about structurally balanced and how we're in a good place. The hugest risk we have is in that program and those reimbursements, and how big a piece of the pie that is in our budget, and how at risk it is right now, depending on what happens at the state level and federal level with that particular Medicaid expansion program and how we get reimbursed for it. So it's something we need to, as a budget committee, keep an eye on in the future. I think we've done a great job in H&HS of actually, one of the reasons why there's that big resource carryover is they are looking at the fact that there is risk there, and they're carrying a significant amount of carryover to protect us from that risk. But that protection can't last forever. Obviously, that's only a couple of years worth of carryover right there compared to what that piece of the pie is. So we need to keep an eye on what happens with those programs and what happens at the federal and state level about our future budget. That's probably our largest piece of risk in our budget right now.
Okay, go ahead.
So Christine, and this is for the budget committee, and because you and I spoke about this, but on PILT. Mm-hmm. And I believe you said we budgeted just under $200,000 for PILT.
For current year.
For current year. Can you let the committee know that it's, because I think it's pretty good news that on the amount of PILT that we received, this is the payment in lieu of in dollars. So if you could comment on that.
Sure. So just in this last week, we received news that the federal government has indeed put PILT back into their budget at a 3% increase. So Lane County, those funds go into the general fund specifically. So I think the last payment we received was about $630,000. So we expect probably about $500,000 over what's budgeted in current year. So that'll carry forward into the next year, right? Yeah.
It's always nice to hear good news. The other thing too, and real quickly, and this is for it's not going to, I don't think we can really discuss it now because we don't know where it's going to go. But I think we'd be remiss to really not discuss the unbelievable gift that Phil and Penny Knight gave the University of Oregon, that I think potentially could bring significant benefits financially and otherwise, not just to Eugene, not just to Lane County, but I think the state of Oregon. And so folks are, this is $500 million of private sector dollars invested here, creating the Phil and Penny Knight Science Campus. And the potential that'll be created here just by infrastructure alone, significant. I mean, the job creation alone, it could add back to the community, as well as to, I think overall the property tax base, the potential there is good. But I think it's one of those things that as we move forward, it'll be, I think, important for us to continue that collaboration and partnership with the University of Oregon, and in particular there. Chris Edwards and Hans Bernard actually gave a report to the AOC Legislative Committee yesterday, and was well received. In fact, so well received that a Tillamook County Commissioner made a motion to actually support the opportunity that they're working on trying to get dollars from the legislature as well. But that's kind of interesting. I think Tillamook County wasn't I think Leanne Thompson may have seconded that. So it was Clatsop County Commissioner. So that I think that tells you how significant this is for not just the city of Eugene, not just Lane County, but I think statewide. And it was pretty interesting that you get a coastal and a northern commissioner from small counties who saw the benefits of that. I thought it was pretty significant. So anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you, Christine. Okay, number 5. Amanda Miller, Performance Auditor.
Good evening, Chair Hedgemans. Good evening, Budget Committee members. So switching gears a little bit, I'm not going to talk about budgeting or the budget. I'm going to talk about performance auditing, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to do so. First, I'll just state again, my name is Shanda Miller. I'm the Lane County Performance Auditor. And most of you know me, but for the benefit of those who may be watching online, I've been the County Performance Auditor for about 2 years now. And prior to coming to the county, I worked for the state of Oregon as a performance auditor for about 10 years. Let's see, I report directly to the Board of County Commissioners, and there's also a performance audit committee that provides oversight over the performance audit program. And Chair Hedgemans is also the chair of the performance audit committee, and Commissioner Farr sits on that committee as well. So tonight I'm going to share, oh, I need the clicker. Okay. Tonight I'm going to share, first I'll give a brief overview of performance auditing and the performance audit program, and then I'll share a little bit about the audits that I've worked on over the last couple of years. So first, what is performance auditing? Different than financial auditing, performance audits look at the effectiveness of programs in meeting goals and objectives. Performance audits can also look at the efficiency of operations. So a couple years ago, soon after I first started, I developed a strategic plan for the performance audit program. And I included a mission, vision, values, and strategic areas of focus. The vision incorporates the role of the auditor, which is to provide relevant, timely analysis and information so the county can continuously improve its services and build public trust. Another critical piece is that the performance audit program is structured so that it is independent and follows government auditing standards, which require the auditor to be objective. So a little bit more on the auditor role. In addition to the programs that I audit, auditors see the public as our client. We also answer the ultimate question: are appropriate and effective controls in place to help a program meet its goals? Also wanted to mention every audit finding is related to a weakness in performance management. And I'll just share the performance management framework. It's a continuous cycle of planning, budgeting, managing to the plan, and then monitoring the results and the performance outcomes. Audits can assist in finding weaknesses in one or more areas of performance management. So the first audit that I completed was the Lane County Financial Indicators Audit, and this was released in March of last year. And a year ago, I presented the results of this audit with you. But tonight, I'm just going to share the overall conclusions of this audit. Lane County's current financial health is stable. Lane County has sound financial and debt management practices and strategic financial planning. Obviously, you've heard a lot of that tonight, and I agree with that. Yet there are declining revenues, as you've also heard, growing expenses, and aging assets also challenge the county's long-term financial health. I provided members of the Budget Committee with the infographic that I created for this audit just as a reminder and something to look at. I also provided additional copies at the back of the room for folks in the audience that might want to take a look. So the second audit that I completed was the Lane County Community Mental Health Program audit issued in December. The purpose of this audit was to evaluate the effectiveness of Lane County's Community Mental Health Program in providing community-based mental health services and preventing the hospitalization and incarceration of individuals due to their mental illness. The overall conclusion is that greater capacity is needed for effective community-based mental health services that includes intensive case management. So first I'll go over some background information and then I'll provide more details on the results of the audit. 8,800 adults in Lane County are diagnosed with severe and persistent mental illness. That's 1 out of 35. Examples of severe and persistent mental illness diagnoses are schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, major depression, and anxiety disorders, which includes post-traumatic stress disorder. Housing is particularly challenging for those with mental illness. During a 6-month period in 2016, 20% of the adults Lane County Behavioral Health accepted as clients were homeless or had been homeless in the past 12 years. Past 12 months. The Sheriff's Office reports that 60% of Lane County jail inmates experience mental illness at any given time. So now I'll share the results of the audit. During the audit, I found the most effective treatment for individuals with severe and persistent mental illness is care focused on recovery, and that includes intensive case management. For intensive case management, a significant amount of care takes place in a client's home. I found there's limited capacity overall for mental health services and limited capacity for intensive case management. At the time of this audit, there were 2 providers, one in Eugene and one in Cottage Grove, that had a combined capacity to provide 150 individuals with intensive case management. One of the things I look at in an audit is what is the impact of the finding. In this case, what is the impact of an overall lack of capacity for mental health services as well as a lack of capacity for intensive case management. National research shows many individuals with severe and persistent mental illness that lack adequate treatment for their illness are more likely to be hospitalized or jailed. Not surprising, jail and hospital costs are much greater than community-based mental health services. I also looked into the cause for the overall lack of capacity for mental health services and lack of capacity for intensive case management. For Lane County Behavioral Health, there are recruitment and retention challenges and payment system challenges. So here are some of the recruitment and retention challenges, and these are in addition to the overall challenge of recruiting a limited supply of healthcare workers. For Lane County Behavioral Health, the payment system favors traditional mental health services such as therapy versus case management. For example, as a federally qualified health center, Lane County Behavioral Health receives 8 times more total Medicaid reimbursement for 30 minutes of therapy than for 30 minutes of case management. During the audit, I also found enhanced coordination is needed to improve continuity of care. Different providers offer different services, and coordinating services improves continuity of care for clients. Last, I found monitoring of client outcomes could improve effectiveness of services and demonstrate cost savings. Recommendations were developed for the areas of recruitment and retention and for the payment structure, as well as recommendations for coordination and client tracking. I'm currently working on a road and bridge maintenance audit. In fact, most of today I was working on writing the report for this audit. I expect to issue this report in early June, about a month from now. The purpose of this audit is to assess the current condition of Lane County's road pavement and bridges and evaluate management strategies and funding needs for protecting the county's road and bridge capital assets. I have also begun field work for the park's cash control audit, and I expect to complete this audit in early July. The purpose of the cash control audit is to review Lane County Park's cash handling practices and determine if adequate cash controls are in place to safeguard cash receipts. And that's all I've got.
Excellent job. Questions, comments? Commissioner?
What is the follow-up on these audits? So you issue the report and then you retire. Okay. Hey, that's one method of doing it. Another way is that we do something besides get the graph on the screen. What is a 6-month follow? Like it said, you know, we're not recruiting or whatever, and the department comes back, I guess if we ask them to, and they say, that was a great idea, we went out and did it. And what in the profession of performance auditing, is there any such thing as follow-up to the audit, or is it like you issued your report, hey, the patient died on the operating table, but that was someone else's problem? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, yes. How does it work?
So I have decided to conduct follow-up a year after an audit report is released. And so actually I submitted a request for an update on the financial condition audit, since that was issued in March of last year. And Christine Moody and others are working on providing me an update. Of course, they've been very busy lately, so, but I'm told that I'll get that this week, very soon. I can tell you that they are making progress in a lot of areas of the recommendations that I had.
So 1 year is a good.
Yeah.
look-see. Okay.
And that's pretty standard, and so I would expect that the next performance auditor would maintain a similar cycle of follow-up, and that they will follow up on the audits that I issued.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Shanda, thank you, and thanks for your years of work. It's gone by very, very fast, and for all of you all who don't know, Shanda is retiring. We'll be leaving the end of July, and we're in the process of finding a replacement for Shanda. But that being said, I'm looking specifically at the behavioral health audit. And when you came, you identified behavioral health as our most critical area, our most critical need for the audit. And in response to Commissioner Sorensen and the results that you delivered from the audit didn't really come as a surprise to very many people. The fact that we're under-resourced, and that our professionals in behavioral health, many of whom are sitting behind you in the room right here, knew a lot of the things that you pointed out. And to me, what's happened since the audit and during the audit, it's given me a rallying point where I can actually use some of the language that came out of the audit to, which is a language that people understand generally, to elevate people's attention to the need that we do need more behavioral health services in Lane County, and that we need more residential service in Lane County. You pointed out that we have 150 beds between Cottage Grove and Eugene. Oh my gosh. And then we add to the fact that the sheriff himself and the jail staff are providing our behavioral health beds, and that the mission is providing behavioral health beds. So it's caused a real atmosphere of urgency surrounding behavioral health and finding ways to put people into residential facilities for behavioral health. And the Poverty and Homelessness Board, which you've reported to a number of times, and which our professional staff keep in touch with, our goal in the Poverty and Homelessness Board is to add 600 supportive housing units where the intense and wraparound casework can occur. It can't occur for the many people you've just discussed who have experienced homelessness in the last 12 months. If people are living on the streets, it's very difficult for them to get services. So in response to Commissioner Sorensen's question, a large part of it is that the people who do the work for us here in Lane County, and they are as good as any place in the nation, and I hear that not from them. I hear that from other people outside of our borders. Is allowing them to really focus on the work and really get people behind the fact that we need to add more resources to our behavioral health approach. So while you're doing the follow-up, the one-year follow-up on the programs, is the people sitting in the room who are making things happen and making things work. And what you're going to be reporting is that a great deal of progress, and I'm looking at the report, the behavioral health report that you provided. It's I don't know, 68 pages, I think is what it is.
No.
No.
I hope not.
I'm skimming through it. I'm down to recommendations right now. But it's chock full of things that really are doable, really are manageable, and really are moving us into a position where we can say the audit helped us to identify how to do our job, how to get the resources to do our job. So the one-year follow-up, Ms. Miller, is going to be good news that we've actually made impressive strides in that particular area. So I think just wanted to point out one more time, and I said it earlier, providing housing is essential to behavioral health, and that came out of your audit report also, that we need more residential services. So thank you for your work, and thank you for 2 years of great work as an auditor.
Thank you. And I'll just clarify that I suppose you could say I'm retiring as a performance auditor, but I'm really leaving more on a short-term sabbatical. So
I misuse the word retiring.
You could call it a mini retirement.
He used it first. He said it first.
Looks like a retirement to me.
Commissioner, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Shanda, on the behavior health, I mean, you look like you had 6 or 7 blocks of recommendations, something like that. So, can you go back to those? Okay, 6. Here, a question I have, and I know that as an auditor, you're kind of into here are the facts, and but have you asked the question, like with the staff, based on perception? 5 years ago, I'd say Lane County maybe wasn't the greatest place you'd want to come to work because were we going to fall off the cliff or not? I mean, I think that's what we were all thinking at one point, is that, you know, we're getting ready to fall off a cliff here. But now with, I think, a little bit more stable, I'd like to get kind of a response from staff, because we hear things, you know, I think citizens hear things, we as elected officials hear things, but I'd like to get a perception of what people are thinking of as far as Lane County and where we are. Is this going to be a good place to come to work? Because one of the things you have right there, explore recruitment and retention policies. All right. Is Lane County a good place where we can recruit for people to come? This is one thing, I've been harping on this with Steve for a long time, and that's talent. We want to make sure we have talent. And so those who are getting ready to retire, that we have talent that's going to follow up, and we're not going to miss a beat. I mean, I was an employer for years. That's that's the thing you thought about more than anything else. So when you ask the questions, is that maybe one of them you'll ask? Is that, what is the overall perception of maybe people who are looking for a career in public service and on the public side? Is Lane County a good place to land? And are they fearful that, yeah, it's a good place to land now, but they're going to go over a cliff and I'll be gone in 5 years? But is it a good place to land now and into the future?
So I think I'll defer most of that question to the county administrator. I understand that there is for current employees, there's a satisfaction survey that's done once a year. I will say that at the very beginning of my audits, when I'm getting to know the program and learning the risks of the program, I will ask staff some questions around, work environment and satisfaction with the job, and some other questions about leadership and things like that, just to get an understanding. But I don't know that I've ever asked the question the way you've put it.
I think it would be interesting just to find that out, because those of us I think have been here just this decade alone. I mean, I got to tell you, those first 2 years were harsh. I didn't enjoy it, but there's no doubt that decisions had to be made. They were made and moved on, and now I think because the decisions that have been made here in the last 2 or 3 years as well, it's put Lane County a little bit stronger financial footing. So that's why I asked that question, because I think perception goes a long ways for folks who are looking at a potential career. We just had a group of folks, I think, here from University of Oregon, that are looking at, focused on what is a career going to look like in the public sector. And is Lane County going to be a good spot for them to land? That's why I asked that question. And then the second is the other audit you're working on. I got to tell you, talking about timing is perfect, because the legislature, I believe, will pass a transportation package, and significant. In fact, the numbers we're looking at right now, in 2018, new road fund money will be about $7.7 million. And based on the index of gas tax by 2028, that number should be about $16.3 million of new money coming into the Lane County Road Fund in year 10. So I think that part of the audit is, the timing I think is really perfect. And if it doesn't pass, I may just call it a day here and say goodnight. So anyway, I guess I put too much blood, sweat, and tears in that one. But anyway, so I think the perception thing, I think is going to be very, very important as you look at explore recruitment and retention policies, as we look at who's retiring and what the new talent who, if they want to come to work for Lane County. Because if we're in a position and the perception's good, I want folks to look at Lane County as an opportunity for them to have a career in the public sector.
Mr. Chair, I wanted to respond to this really good question, Commissioner Lycan, about, I guess, our attraction as an employer. And I was looking at my phone because I keep notes on different statistics, and we just hired through our diversity internship program a graduate student from the University of Oregon to start pulling together various data from throughout the organization and start compiling sort of meaningful, a dashboard of meaningful data across the organization that will help drive decisions for us. And so I'm sort of keeping some of this information, and I had a note on this that in 2016, despite having the highest number of employees since 2012, so in 2016 we had the highest number of employees since 2012. If you exclude retirements and involuntary separations, we had the lowest turnover rate in over 5 years, even though we offered a VSIP in 2016. Remember, the board approved a VSIP that allowed for a number of groups non-represented in 2 bargaining units, a voluntary separation incentive program. We had the lowest number of individuals that left service other than involuntary separation and retirement. So I think that's pretty good in 5 years. So I think that's some pretty good data to demonstrate that there probably are a number of things that contribute to that. We also have a number of specific examples. I think you could look around the room and point, there are a number of folks in this room who are eligible to retire, but they haven't. I mean, I'd point to, I hate to call them out, but I will call them out, the DA and the sheriff. You know, they took on more responsibility, reduction in pay, I believe, a lot of challenges, I think out of a sense of public service and obligation. You can look around the room at people that have been here for a number of years and continue to stay. You can look around the room and at individuals who have joined our organization within the last several years, and they chose to come here, even though they had a lot of other opportunities. So I think we've got, you know, in my view, both some really good data across the organization to demonstrate that we have some pretty good stability and there's not a lot of turnover that's happening. Individuals that are choosing to leave to go to another organization. And in fact, individuals that are choosing to come to our organization over others because we have a really strong culture here.
So Shanda, do you think that you've been a professional auditor now for, you know, well over a decade. So do you think that's an appropriate question to ask? Or do you believe that from the audit's perspective, just present the facts, there it is, here's the recommendations, and it's up to the rest of you to ask that question?
Can I answer
Yes. Sure.
Please.
And then I'd like to say something.
Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, so first I'll just say that my approach and many performance auditors' approach to recommendations are that they are not prescriptive. It is really a management role to determine the best way to find solutions that relate to those recommendations. So I just wanted to say that.
Okay. And I would like to add to that this, to me, represents the full circle of the performance audit function from the work we did to start the committee. The idea was that Shanda, or the performance auditor, does an audit and presents the facts. Now, earlier she mentioned that Medicare pays 7 or 8%.
8 times.
8 times more for actual therapy than case management. But other phases of case management and coordination are very important. So while Lane County doesn't control Medicare's rules, several of you go to the legislature. A lot of the Medicare regulations in this state come from the state. So that would be a good example to rally for, hey, let's make a tweak. We have proven, we have shown, our mental health people have shown that there is a better way. Let's try that better way. And that's something that came out of the performance audit. The next performance audit that's coming down the pike is cash management at the Parks Department, okay? Now that's one that is going to be 100% laid at the hands of the commissioners and the county administrator, and you will have total control to manage the result of that audit. So the beauty of this system is the auditor works directly for the commissioners. There's no filter, it's a direct communication. And what the auditor discovers And I had asked that this very presentation be made to the Budget Committee, and I know it's been around for a while, and you've had an opportunity to look at it, digest it, figure out the things that you can control, and work it into the county budget process. So this is very gratifying for me personally, having been involved in this process, to see it come full circle and do exactly what it's intended to do, is lay the information at the feet of the commissioners and administration, and now it belongs to the commissioners, to the budget committee, to the county staff to deal with. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Great work.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, just to follow up on Commissioner Lycan and Shanna's response, that the retention's not prescriptive, the method is not prescriptive, that it's management-based. And I'm looking at your actual audit, and it says that Lane County Behavioral Health has implemented several new recruitment and retention strategies, and it's continually pursuing other activity. I'll move on down. And where it continues to seek improvement, included are increased budgets for outside training opportunities. And a little bit further down, another area that's extremely important is in supporting behavioral health employees is the provision of trauma-informed practices and care. So what is happening in behavioral health is that they are actually, they have a program for retention. They have a program not just for recruiting, because, you know, if you run SeaWorld and you want a killer whale to jump over the bar, clear out of the water, you're not going to go find a killer whale that jumps over the bar. You have to find one who you can train to jump over the bar. And that's what happens in a great department, is you get excellent staff and you provide them with the training opportunities to make them even better at their work and to make them happy in their work. And that's what that is exactly what's happening as far as the behavioral health department is concerned, is we're retaining staff at new levels in ways that we've never done it before, because we are implementing several new recruitment and retention strategies. So it's exactly what you said. It's not prescriptive. It's up to the management to take it and find ways to make it happen, and they're doing it. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You will be missed. Okay. The next item on the agenda, other than the break, is a public hearing. There is nobody signed up for a public hearing. Is there anybody in the room that missed the sign up that would like to speak? Okay, shall we start assigning discussion talks start with the district attorney? Okay, so I'm assuming that protocol-wise, we can close the public hearing. Okay, so I will open it and close it as no one has signed up. And I believe we are adjourned.
All right.
What a great chair.